Is there any value to developing one's third eye, or is this a waste of time?
Thank you. Again, it's about what do you imply by third eye? What do you imply by third eye? In the book Siddha Tantra, Jivanmukti has written, shared the understanding of third eye. It's a saying. It's a saying because, again, it's a human context. Within human context, we understand that everything has to have, or a pair of eye, you may say, eyes. And then there is something there is something within the brain that can perceive the reality beyond the physical scope. So people named it simply as a third eye experience, right? So, and everything, because obviously eyes see, but something within the brain kind of appears to see something else too, but it's not a clearly defined eye. So in the book, it's written that there is a chamber within the, it's like that is the thing that is the real cave. It's a cave of self where you retire and where you perceive yourself in an absorbed way, where you realize the ultimate being. And so now the whole chamber with both pituitary and pineal glands is the so-called, you may call it the third eye. So it's not just a pineal gland or pituitary gland, which is usually speculated in these new age circles or whatever, yogic circles. People speculate because there's no direct experience. In order to have the direct experience, one needs to refine self. Now, the pituitary gland activates during the awakening, which means if you perceived self in stillness, in contentment, you absorb to self, so the mind returned to the natural being for a glimpse. At this point, it's like both glands activate, the entire chamber activates. But now pituitary gland will take on the whole process and the process of refinement before you can actually use the pineal gland. And this is an anatomy or the science of this, the kind of the physical, anatomical science of this process, which most of the people do not know. They just speculate or they experience something in glimpses and drew conclusions. But it's the entire, basically, awakening. You awake to the subtle being. Now, the subtle being operates through these glands and is connected with the physical being through the glands. And these glands are not just the pituitary pineal, these are also other glands, which are thyroid and thymus and sexual glands and so on, digestive glands. But everything functions as a integrated organism. So it's not just like one gland or the other. But the governor of all these glands is the pituitary gland. So you can call it the mother gland. So the way the pituitary gland functions will define the way everything functions. Now, pituitary gland represents our physical and emotional. So it's kind of a subtle, gross emotional aspect of being. So it governs our perception of reality and existence in the subtle and the physical. Pineal gland is something else. It has a different function, but yet it has to do with the cycles of time and how we exist through cycles of time. And so, the entire process, the process of awakening, how we perceive it in the physical body through the also realization that we are beyond the physical, so we will start perceiving the subtle body. this all will be governed and propelled, and it all will be kind of navigated through the pituitary gland. So the upper glands, they're like bridges between the subtle body and the physical body. And so the changes in the thought, but again, they are still governed by consciousness. So the changes and refinement and thought process will reflect on the physical body. The changes in perception in consciousness will reflect on the physical and the subtle body. So the entire process of refinement happens kind of behind the scenes and is reflected on the subtle, and the subtle is reflected on the physical through the mechanism of the glands. But nothing is separate, nothing is more important or less important. Nothing is kind of, or should be seen as a separate element. It's all just one mechanism of existence, which so far we weren't aware of. So we were aware of self as a physical body, where we saw, okay, there are glands, but the organs are more important on the physical realm. Now the glands are more important on the subtle realm, and also as bridges between the subtle and physical, where the glands simply transmit information into the physical body. And how they transmit it through the mechanism of secretion or hormones. So when people have mental, emotional imbalances, they'll naturally have hormonal imbalances, which is just a natural way of seeing the subtle body functioning and operating in the physical body. So the malfunction or the issues are in the subtle body. And the subtle body represents this individual mind consciousness. So through that, we will see how the body will look, how the body will feel, and so on and so forth. And now this mechanism of thoughts and emotions, or thought emotional patterns transmitting themselves into the physical body, again happens through the mechanism of the glands, where the pituitary gland is the most important. The pineal gland is something else. On one hand, it helps us to adjust to different environments. It's more of a tool for survival, but on a higher level. So, but the entire chamber represents our level of intelligence and the way this intelligence dwells in the physical corporeal body. So this physical body will be having certain functions. Let's say if one is very refined and one has undergone some transformation, so the pituitary and pineal gland will function differently. It means that they will transmit the purity of the subtle, which may give the physical body certain boons that sometimes people call as siddhis, or different skills. These are just siddhis, means different skills to be adapted to reality in a better way. For example, not to feel cold, or not to be dependent on food, and so on. Because all these dependencies are governed by an evolutionary level. And this evolutionary level is transmitted through the pituitary and pineal glands into the body. So the pituitary gland will change, and obviously the change will happen to the physical body. So people should not neglect the fact that they are the actual subtle being, first of all. And this subtle being lives in the physical body. And the physical body is simply a reflection and understanding of subtle being. And as long as the physical body is supported by the subtle body, and the subtle body is connected to the ultimate, there's an inexhaustible source of energy. But again, it doesn't mean anything, because in the limited egotistic way of seeing it, is everybody thinks, wow, it's so cool. It's not cool. It's an evolutionary level where such a thought as, oh, that's cool, does not occur. It's because the evolutionary level means there is a wisdom and intelligence there. And it means that a being chooses to live long in the physical body or maintain the physical body longer only because there is some interest or desire to learn something through this physical body. But it's a freedom. The freedom means that, first of all, the freedom from thought emotional patterns, that's the freedom from conceptual knowledge, and the freedom of being dependent to the matter. But if you're independent or autonomous, it doesn't mean that you don't choose to live in the matter or in the physical body. So all of these things have to be very clearly understood before one engages with engages with this process. Because just to experience awakening, we experience our natural being many times during the day, but for a short period of time. Experience awakening means perceive self in an equanimous way for a longer period, which creates an internal shift, which makes one's limited intelligence realize that one is so much more than just a havoc, an emotional or thought havoc. So it gives one a sense of balance, but a sense of balance is not anything. It's just there, natural. The whole idea is to refine self through that sense of equanimity and balance. And when one goes through refinement, it means what? One has to face all of that which is limited, obscuring, transitory, draining, and leading one to decay and old age and eventually physical death. So that's why most of the religions were talking about the eternal life, because the subtle being does not need to die. But subtle being as well could be destroyed by different involvements with the occult and different kind of thought emotional world and its entities. So people, at this day and age, are very obscure about the subject of spirituality, besides the fact that everyone is yelling spirituality on all the corners and everyone promotes yoga, and no one knows what yoga is, because to know means to be yoga. There's no achievement. There's no achievement through awakening. There's no achievement through yoga. There's a being that is so intelligent that pulls one out of this constraints, self-created constraints and evolutionary limitations. Now, evolutionary limitations doesn't mean bad. It's just an experience of consciousness seeing itself being engrossed in the matter. And then awakening means realizing that and going back to the origins. So this is the whole point. There's nothing good or bad. There's nothing to fight with. It's just the being that is always there, that has always been there. But the individual consciousness, or the collective, let's say, consciousness first, chose through individual consciousness get involved and attached to the matter and experience the attachment. And experience to see what this attachment leads to. How the attachment to the transitory matter leads to decay, corruption, loss of the physical essence, and again, rebirth. And so by having understood that, we just realize that, well, for one individual now is a time to evolve. So that individual awakes and evolves and breaks now through the constraints, realizes the mechanisms of attachments, links with the matter, mechanisms of draining, decaying, and age, and transcends if there is enough courage and spiritual intelligence and support there. But for the majority, it's still a very, very far off perspective, I would say, at this point of time. Some individuals who whose time is evolutionary time is to break through, they'll break through one way or the other. But the majority will just dwell in their illusions, and there's nothing wrong with that. They'll simply experience the illusions, the matter, the attachments to the T. And this is what their the time for their consciousness is.